Welcome, I'm Michael Bickert. Thanks for joining me today as we explore concepts with the objective of improving your management skills and growing your business. Why are you watching me? Why are you doing this right now? If not, to move your business forward. And since that is the reason why you are doing this, I want you to grab a notepad, grab a pen, commit to yourself that you will jot down some sort of action item that you can implement to improve your business today. All right, recently I was approached by somebody and asked for advice. It was human resource related advice. And the question was something along the lines of, what do I do with this particular person that I have that is consistently failing to meet expectations, makes a commitment and then doesn't follow through with it, and it lets down other members of the team, and it's a little exasperating, and this person was at his wit's end and wanted to know, what do I do? So I would like you to think through this with me, and I want you to think, well, what would you do in that case? And so if you've been following along and watching some of my other videos, you should know that the first thing is never just respond to a question. You've got to get more information. So of course, that's where I started. I wanted to have more information. So the first thing I asked is, well, how is this person's performance overall? I mean, you may be describing certain aspects of the performance that are failing to meet expectation, but is this person overall doing a good job for the company? And you know, I need to get that answer before I can elaborate on what advice I would give. And is this person getting some sort of performance review on a regular basis? Does this person have a report card? And if so, how is this person performing on his report card? So the answers to those questions should greatly affect what you would do if you have a similar situation to this. And you know, we've got lots of material that can help you with all of these other things that I'm referring to, how to put together a report card, how to create one, what to do in human resources to do regular performance reviews. And so anyway, in this case, you know, I got the answer, and the person was, well, it was a little, it was looking like the person was actually experiencing improvement overall on his report card. He did indeed have a report card, and he should be expected to continue on an upward trajectory, even though there were some areas that were a little exasperating, as I said, because the person was consistently failing to meet commitments and expectations associated with those commitments. So then the next thing I want to talk about is the accountability, and you should watch our videos on accountability if you haven't yet. And I'm like, okay, well, you're saying that this is consistently happened. Has this person been held accountable? And are those measures, those accountability measures, are they progressive in nature? If not, then this is all predictable. This is all very symptomatic of some underlying problems within the organization. So you need to have ongoing performance reviews, and you need to have accountability. And what you might see here is what I'm doing is I'm turning the lens back on the organization and the management team that for which this particular individual works, to ask themselves, are they meeting their obligations? Have you met your obligations to your people? Because this is a little bit tricky. We want to be fair to people at all times and make sure that we're giving them all the opportunities to succeed. So in this instance, and you know, I can give you different responses depending, but let's go backwards here. If the answer was, well, no, we haven't really been doing performance reviews, we don't have a report card, I'd say, okay, well, that's where you have to start. You have to start there. You have to put together some mechanism by which you measure everything. Otherwise, you're a little bit shooting in the dark. You're kind of going by your perception and feel, and oftentimes reality, the data does not support people's perception of what's going on. So a person might be upsetting one individual in an organization, somebody may be more vocal, another person might be performing even at a lower level but flying under the radar, so to speak, and getting away with it. So you don't want to go by that kind of stuff. You want to go with what the data says. And so if the answer had been, well, we don't actually have a report card for this person, I'd say, well, start there. And then have periodic performance reviews where you can review the report card and see, is this person on the right trajectory? The other thing was, well, is this person, when we talk about the obligations and turning the lens back on the organization to make sure that the supervisor is being fair to the individual, is this person sure of what they're supposed to do? Do they have a role description? And it's like, oh yeah, they do, and this person has been asked in specific meetings, will they commit to the following action items or tasks to be done and so on, and that is where they're failing to follow through. So it's not a matter of, well, they don't understand what the expectation is. Okay, so remember that second part, which is about accountability. Okay, so when they aren't following through on their commitments, is it being brought to their attention? Are they being is it formally documented? Are you formally reprimanding them, coaching them in such a way that they understand, oh yeah, I'm failing? And are those progressive in nature? So that's the second thing that I would give in terms of advice. Now, I've created a video that really highlights the main reasons, and I think I say there's somewhere between 7 and 9 reasons why people do not do what is expected of them. And one of them is they may be incapable. And I wanted to explore this possibility. Is this person incapable? And in fact, we started to think in our discussion with this person that was seeking advice from me, that perhaps the person is incapable of doing what is expected. And ordinarily I would say, well, that falls back on human resources and the supervisor, the organization. Did you put the person in the wrong role? And that's not the case in this specific, but I want you to think about that. If you've got a person who is committing to things and it's not because of their effort or an attitude or any kind of obstinance, it may be that they're incapable. They may lack the aptitude, that some kind of experience or skill that they need. They're just not cut out for doing what you're asking of them. And then, so where that takes you in your headspace is you say, was this clear from the beginning that this would be expected? When I hired this person, or when this person took over this role, was it clear that this was going to be in the job description, in the role description? This would be expected of them. If the answer is yes, and maybe they misled you or whatever the case may be, and they're incapable, then, well, actually, it doesn't really matter what the answer is. If you conclude that they are incapable, then you have to go on the same path. But what I really was trying to get at there is, if you failed to tell the person that certain things would be expected in the role, and now you're making those demands on the person, and just because they're afraid to say they can't do it, or they've got a good attitude, they're gonna try, but they consistently fail, that's really not on them. You still have to do something about it, but at least you can look inward and say, well, we've got to be fair to this person because we failed to tell this person that this is going to be expected, and make sure you don't make that mistake in the next time you hire someone. Now, here's what happens in business a lot is that role descriptions change. So you may hire somebody, may have somebody who's doing a perfectly good job, or they're meeting or maybe exceeding expectations, and then something changes and they're failing to meet expectations on a consistent basis. So the next question you have to ask yourself is, have expectations changed, and why? And then it gets a little bit tricky. And I want to say to you that this is very relevant, I would say increasingly so, because the world is a rapidly changing place and it's becoming ever increasingly more changing. That's a mouthful. I'm not sure that was grammatically accurate, but you get what I'm saying here. Changes are coming fast and furious. Technology is advancing. There's all sorts of reasons why people may have to adapt in their role. And I would say it's just going to happen more and more. So that's why this is a relevant conversation and something that you as a manager need to think about for being effective. So when you create a role description for somebody, make sure you say, of course, this is created as of today, this is what our expectations are now, but as our market changes, as technologies change, as the business needs change, so will your role description. And you've got to be clear with me if we ever put something on your plate that you feel incapable for whatever reason, so that we can, work it out together, because the business needs what the business needs. So you can see where this is going. And in this particular case, it was decided that yes, you know, if we're being fair about it, yes, the role description has changed and the expectations of this person have changed, which is completely common, and that's fine. It's like, okay, so now we go back to that thing in our mind where we've got to be fair. We want to be fair to the person, give them every opportunity to exceed. And the question becomes, is there another way that you can accomplish these expectations? Is there somebody else in the organization? Is this something that can be delegated elsewhere? Do you have this on the right person's plate? And if you've already determined that the person is incapable, then I would say the answer is no. So where do you go from there? And I think you have to decide to change the role description to exclude those things. But, you know, we've already said that your business needs these things done, and there's an expense. I mean, that's value that the person is doing. Sometimes when role descriptions change, for whatever reason, because of the market or the business needs, some of the things that the person used to be responsible for doing are no longer relevant. And so their workload has in fact gone down, or you might look at it this way, the value they provide to the organization has gone down, and that is part of the reason that there's new responsibilities, there's new ways for them to do things, and they're expected to you know, maybe keep up with that technology, keep up with that new skill, whatever the case may be. And so it's perfectly reasonable from a cost. If you're looking at it strictly from a financial point of view in managing your business, you might say, well, I need to get the value I originally got out of this person. And if he or she is incapable of doing what I need because of the changes, what do I do? These are great questions. This is exactly what I want you doing at all times, is you got to kind of work your way through this. And so the answer may occur to you that, well, it may be that this person needs to be paid less money. If you aren't going to be able to rely on that person to deliver the value of the full role description as it exists today, and their responsibilities or their workload has decreased for whatever reason, along with their role description changes, then that might be fair to talk to the person and say, you know, we're going to take this off your plate, but of course we're going to have to pay someone else to do this. And therefore, we may need to talk about a decrease in your remuneration in some way. Of course, there are many ways to solve a problem, many ways to skin a cat, as it were. And another thing you might be able to do is do a little bit of job sharing. There might be something on someone else's role description within the organization, another stakeholder, another team member, who has something for which they're responsible that this original individual that we're talking about might be better suited. So that's what you want to do. The ideal situation here comes down to this. You want to try to align people, well, you want to align the interests of the organization and all the stakeholders, but what I'm getting at here is you want to try to get people focused on their strengths. You're really not going to be a successful organization if you have a lot of people working on things that they're not good at. I mean, that's obvious. So let's look at the flip side of that coin. The degree to which your organization will succeed will in large part be a relationship with how closely you are able to match people's strengths with their role description and those things for which they are responsible. So you got to think of that. And the example I'm giving in this discussion and the advice I was giving, this person may be incapable of doing certain parts of the job. Now I would ask, well, are there things that this person can take on from someone else? And sort of, you think of it like trading some of the role description, trading some of the responsibilities, trading some of the tasks. And some of these things might be temporary, others might be permanently. And you want to adapt as a manager, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur. You want to think of yourself as flexible and adaptive, and it requires communication and an underlying attitude that I want to be fair to my people. My people are the best, and that's where we come right back, or I didn't finish my thought. My people are the best part of my business. That should be your attitude. And then you come right back to that thing where that's the performance review and the report card, the overall evaluation of the person. Because the direction my advice is going today in this discussion and with the individual who sought my advice may be different depending on the answers to those preceding questions. If the person is like, well, actually, yes, they do have a report card and they're not performing well in a lot of areas, well, then it really comes back to our discussion on accountability, and I won't go deeply into that today. Watch our video on that instead. And progressive consequences, and you may not have a really solid individual in that role. I would encourage you always to try to find ways to make people succeed. You've taken the time to invest in your people, try to help them succeed. And that may be in part because of the changing environment, the changing business climate is what I'm getting at, and the needs or the market conditions, whatever it may be, that might be part of the reason. And you might really have to change this person's role description. So look and carefully discuss with other stakeholders, is there a different role we can put this? It's very common in business that you may have to switch people into a different role. And if people have been with an organization for a very long time, it's very common that they've worked their way through various roles. And part of that is because of the change. Part of it is because you discover more about that person. You determine, hey, this person has a real strength for this. Maybe we can put this on their plate. They're not so good at that. Let's take that off. And you do a little bit of shuffling. You know, think of a buffet restaurant where people should have the option to load up their plate with those things that they like the most. And ideally, I know this isn't practical all the time, but ideally that's exactly how a role description would be. You'd be able to load on things that people enjoy doing, for which they have a great strength, and you'll just, you'll go upward and onward. But when you have a lot of things on someone's role description for which or with which they struggle, they're not gonna perform well. And I don't want to see you having to always terminate positions if the person has some underlying things that are really well fit for your organization. Of course, there are cases where you do have to let people go, and you may be disappointed, and you might just realize this person was not a good fit for our organization for whatever reason. At one point they were, or at one point we thought there was a good fit. There's too many changes, or we misjudged when we hired the person, and then of course you have to eliminate that person. But before getting to that, walk yourself through all these other questions. Do you have some other very data-based, relevant and accurate data-based report card through which you measure their performance? And do you have recurring performance review meetings? And how are they doing on that? That tells you what to do as a manager. That guides you. And are you holding people accountable? Are you issuing and administering progressive consequences, as the case may be? Are you commending people when they're doing a good job on things? That's the flip side of that. You want to make sure you're celebrating people's success and commending them when they're doing a good job. And all these things are clues to you in management of where to guide your people. And maybe you want to give somebody some more responsibility. If they're doing a really good job with one thing, people have a finite amount of time. The other thing I want to point out, and that's a good segue to this, is you have a finite amount of time. So if everything I'm discussing right now makes sense to you and you go, yeah, that's all well and good, but if you're being honest with yourself, you realize in your organization you don't have really relevant, accurate report cards, you don't have recurring performance reviews, you don't have strict accountability measures and processes in place, and you're saying, I would like to have that stuff, but I don't have it, and I don't know where I'm going to find the time. I get it. You have a finite amount of time. That's why we exist. So make sure you reach out to bickertmanagement.com, and we have human resource packages. We can do a lot of this stuff for you. We can walk you through this. I produce these videos and have these discussions, and you're welcome to put things in the comments and ask me. You can contact us on social media or in our chat on the website. Any way you want to communicate to me and you have questions, I will try to address them for you, and there's no charge for any of that. I'll just produce a video that we can all benefit from. But if you realize that this is just going to be a recurring problem because the answer I'm giving makes sense to you and you go, I just don't have the time to do that stuff, we get it. You should be focused on scaling your business, adding value, innovating your business, those things, the big picture, and then you can delegate this stuff to us, or there might be some other stakeholder in your organization who can take some of this stuff on. But I'm telling you, if you don't do some of the stuff that I've covered here, this is just going to be a recurring problem, and you're going to constantly be going through people. That is no way to run an organization. Your people are your greatest asset. They're the best part of your business, as I said earlier. And get great people, work with great people, and have fun and enjoy it. And every time there's a challenge, I want you to be excited about it and think, yeah, this is a challenge. and how are we going to decide to tackle this when your conclusion is, this is far down the list, I got to put this on the back burner, there's too many things ahead of this. First of all, I would congratulate you for realizing that, and then I would say, okay, reach out to a company like ours. Now, there's costs involved, of course, we charge, we run a business, but there's costs involved by not doing this. By not doing these things and having to turn over staff, that's very expensive. I don't have the data on me right now. I've looked at this stuff before and I've tried to quantify it, and it depends on the role and all this kind of stuff, but turnover of staff is very expensive. There are very hard costs that are associated with it, and then there's some soft costs, or let's say hidden costs, some things like where your organization is just failing to perform as well as it would if you didn't have to turn over staff. So give some thought to that. You might be stepping over dollars to pick up dimes by trying to avoid, paying someone like us to do this stuff for you. But enough with the commercial there. Let me just sort of wrap things up here. I hope this gave you an idea of what you would do in a situation like this. The overarching principle here should be, you need to be fair to people. We want to be fair to our people. We want to give them every opportunity to succeed. So you need to look inward within the organization, the supervisors, your HR processes, and make sure that you have things in place to help people succeed. Having said all that, there is some onus on the people as well. I mean, you have to take responsibility for yourself and the individual who's failing to meet expectations. You can't continue to make excuses for that person constantly. It's incumbent upon them to maybe speak up. In this instance, I said to the person who was asking me the advice, I said, you may need to put the words in the person's mouth. The person may be very afraid of admitting out loud, I am not capable of doing it. Or they may think that that's just not in their vocabulary, like they would think of that as defeatist or sort of quitting or not trying hard enough. So they're like, I will do this and everything, but they don't realize, maybe they don't have a good self-awareness and they don't realize that they're incapable of doing these things. They try and they get stuck. Every situation is different. You have to ask these questions. But as I said, let's be fair to our people. Let's make sure we have good infrastructure in place to maximize the chances for success. It's about your business. You need to be true to your business. You have an obligation for your business to grow. There's lots of people relying on you, so don't take this stuff lightly. I think that's where I'm going to leave it today. I'm curious if this makes sense to you. Have you encountered something like this or something similar? Do you want me to cover another concept? Reach out, like I said, in any way, reach out to us. I prefer you put a comment in here. I can address it in the comments. Other people can address in the community through their comments of how they've dealt with these things. But we just want to learn from one another. Perpetual refinement.